Welcome back to the wood shop, everybody. We've been doing a bunch of woodworking. We've even done some leather working. I think today it's time to do some metal working. We're gonna fire up the forge, make a Father's Day gift for my dad. Come check it out. Alright, so we just fired up the forge. We'll let that thing warm up for a little bit. This weekend is Father's Day weekend. So I've been thinking for the last couple weeks of a cool gift to make for my dad. And what I came up with is a Japanese style marking knife. A marking knife basically replaces a pencil in the wood shop. With fine woodworking, it's nice to have a really straight, crisp, square line that you can transcribe onto wood to make sure you can cut to in a really precise way. I have a super hardened piece of steel here. This is actually a U-bolt off of a semi-truck. This thing is incredibly hard. What we're gonna do is we're gonna cut a couple chunks off of this, weld it onto some rods so I can work with it in the fire, pound it out, make two really nice, super sharp, hardened steel Japanese marking knives. We just used the jet bandsaw with the water cooling to cut both of the torch cut ends of the semi-truck U-bolt. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to cut basically like 1.25 inches off both these ends. Like I said earlier, I'm going to make two of these marking knives. One's going to be for myself, one's going to be for my dad. And I'm just going to make those two cuts here right now. So we'll just move this over just a bit. That looks pretty good. Lock it back down. Alright, so I got some 1/2-inch steel rod here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut two, kind of like 2-foot sections. That way I can hold this and put the end in the forge, and that way it's not getting super heated up. And instead of using tongs on a real small piece of metal like that, using this as basically a makeshift handle while we're forging this piece is going to be pretty much the best thing to do here. So, kind of like I said, a piece of 1/2-inch round rod. We got both of our pieces. We're gonna run over to the welding table and just weld these to the pieces of metal that we're gonna smith today. Like I said, that way we have a nice long handle. This can get hot in the forge. We can hold on to that end while we're working on the piece. We got our Miller 252 MIG welder here. Standard MIG welders run on a 75-25 mix of argon and CO2. If you've ever wondered, welding gas doesn't have any flammable quality, at least not in a MIG welder. What the argon and the CO2 are for is eradicating moisture out in front of the weld site. So all it's doing is cleaning up out in front of your weld as the gas is coming out of the tip and the filler rod's coming out of the gun. Alright, we got both of our pieces of that hardened steel. We got welded to these handles. We're going to pop these in the forge, get them starting to heat up here. All right, we got our first piece pretty well heated up here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna work on drawing these pieces out here. What's nice about smithing two things at one time is you can keep one of them in the fire while you're working on that other piece. I want to give a quick shout out to my buddy Aaron Lane. He's a farrier over in Central Oregon, and he does a lot of work all around Oregon. He's a mobile farrier, but he made this hammerhead for me. This thing is absolutely sick. It's got a rounding head and a flattening head. It's 2 pounds. He gave me the hammerhead. I made an awesome handle for it. This thing is so rad. This is actually my first real time using it, so being able to do it with this project is super fun. So thanks, Aaron. This thing is sick, man. Alright, so we got these pieces drawn out now to about twice their original length. We're going to keep them nice and rectangular and continue to draw these things out until they're about 5.5, 6 inches long. At that point, we'll kind of just get a general shape and we'll do the rest of it on the grinder. We're going to keep pounding on these things, like I said, until we're about 5.5, 6 inches long. Cool them down, shape them up, and then temper them so they'll be super hard. We'll keep this one back in the fire, get it heated up, keep drawing them out. Alrighty, so we're almost the width of the anvil here, which is about 3 times of what we started with. Now we're getting nice and thin, we're tapering it out. We're still about 3/8 to about 1/2 inch thick, and we're going to want to get this down to just about under 1/4 inch in thickness. So as we get it thinner, it gets easier and easier to draw this thing out. And when I say draw it out, we're hammering with the rounding side of the hammer, moving metal down towards the tip to elongate the piece of work material that we're working with. It's really nice right now because the thinner we get, the easier it is to do that. However, we have to be aware of the temperature that we're maintaining on the workpiece, as well as the edges, to make sure we don't fold an edge over or crease the piece of material. So right now we work with nice good heat for shorter amounts of time, so we can draw this thing out get it closer to the shape that we want. Alright, so we got our marking knife blank here drawn out to about 5 inches. We're just under 1/4 inch of thickness, and we're about 3/4 of an inch wide. We got maybe 1 or 2 more hammerings to get this just drawn out and shaped before we cut this thing off and do the rest of the shaping on the grinder. So we're going to go back and forth, just a couple more hammerings, refine the edge, make sure this is in the exact shape that we want. We're pretty much grinding the rest of it up here. Alright, so we're right about 6 inches, and that's pretty much the entirety of the length that we're going to do. All we're going to do is just clean it up just a little bit. We'll do the rest of the shaping on the grinder, like I said. Super pleased with how this came out. As far as I can see right now, there's no stress fractures, and everything's pretty straight. So we're going to do one more touch-up hammering, a little bit of texturing. We'll let these things cool off. All right, that looks pretty good. All we're gonna do is we're just gonna let these 2 pieces slow cool before we cut the final shape into them. Alrighty, we got our blanks to cool down. Took about 10-15 minutes of sitting on our metal fab table. What's nice about having a thick metal fab table is that steel really does a good job of just extracting heat out of pieces in a slow, pretty slow way. So we got these down, you know, just little ways under a 1/4 inch here, between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. They're really straight. It came out really nice. So what we're going to do is we're just going to mark out the general design, cut that out with the angle grinder, and do the rest of the shaping on the belt sander before we heat treat it one more time to make sure our edge that we cut is really sharp and really strong. Of course, I don't really want to be using a rigid belt sander for making nice pieces of blacksmith metal, but it's what we have right now. One day, Alex Steele, if you ever watch this, I'm coming for you. We're going to get one of your belt sanders here at some point soon. So much of what we do is woodworking. We do a lot of welding. Getting into stuff like blacksmithing is something I've been really excited about the last few years. We've done nice artistic accents and different pieces for some of our furniture, but doing some real smithing is something that I've never really done before. So any haters out there, if you guys said I would do a bunch of stuff wrong, I'm just learning. So, you know, give me some patience here. All right, we're gonna shape these things up and see what we come up with here. Alright, so we got the edges flattened out, the tail of the knife rounded out. And what we're going to do is we're just going to mark out where we're going to cut the actual blade portion. We want a nice, pretty long surface area, about an inch, inch and a quarter. That's going to be our marking area. And that way we'll make a nice, long, planed out, flat blade that comes to a point that you can hold up against another piece of wood to scribe a good true square line to. So we're just going to mark it out, cut it with the angle grinder, and shape the rest of it on the belt sander here. So that pretty much is going to be the rough outline of our marking knife. As you can see, we have this nice round part that goes kind of into the corner of your hand. A pretty long blade that, like I said, we're going to taper to a pretty wide bevel. And that way you can mark on pieces of wood to make a nice accurate line you can cut to. We keep dipping this in the water just to keep the metal cool. That way we make sure we're not getting too hot and softening the steel too much. All right, now we're going to refine that edge right here on the belt sander. That pretty much is the finished shape right here. We have a little bit more touching up to do, but the handle or the tang of the knife has this beautiful hand-hammered texture that feels really good in the hand. The blade has a really nice, strong, thick back, which should retain a good point. And really the point is what it's all about. The point right here is what is scoring your lines in your carpentry work. The blade has a steep bevel to it with a nice, long, sharp edge. I just kind of ground this finger relief into it, so it feels really, really good. You should be able to mark and score at a bunch of different angles, and with that maximum kind of real extreme angle of the blade, you can get into deeper, kind of farther away places, you know, than you can with your pencil most times. All in all, I'm so happy with how this has turned out. What we're gonna do is we're gonna fire the forge back up, heat it up just a little bit, heat treat it in oil, put its final edge on here. The Japanese marking knife is just about done. All we have left to do is to quench the blade before we put the final edge on it. Quenching is a process of heating and cooling metal that actually hardens it while it's in the process of doing that. We got an old tub of just old motor oil, and we're going to heat the forge back up a little bit. We're going to set the blade back in there. We don't need to harden the whole knife. We'll just kind of heat up the front tip. We don't want to heat it up all the way super hot, but we want to get it to a light glow. We're going to dunk it in the oil. Then, theoretically, it should be really hard for us to keep a nice solid edge on it. All right, it looks even during the heat treating that thing cooled down really straight, really flat. I think we did a pretty good job at it. So we're gonna let this cool all the way down. We're gonna go to the whetstone, put a final edge on it. So we just heat treated in oil, the Japanese style marking knife. This thing is so cool. Honestly, I'm a pretty rookie blacksmith. I wouldn't even call myself a blacksmith at all. And this might be the best thing I've ever made with the forge and with the anvil. I'm so happy with how this has come out. All we have left to do is just put a final edge on this thing. It's already pretty sharp. The point is super sharp. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to our 3000 grit whetstone, sharpen it up by hand. This thing's all done. All right, the Japanese marking knife is complete. This thing was so much fun to make. I really don't get a lot of time over there getting to hammer on the anvil, and really, I'm still just learning so much every single time I get over there. Like I said before, we've made a lot of different accent pieces and artistic pieces that complement our furniture, whether it be metal spreader bars on dining tables or corner caps for different types of things. But being able to smith a useful tool is something I am all about. I have a long ways to go. I'm learning as much as I can. If you guys have any suggestions, drop them in the comment. Just don't be a hater. We're all learning together. If you guys learned anything or got inspired to do something on your own, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. And Dad, happy Father's Day.
Okay.